Ladies and gentlemen, the next item in the order paper is a motion on the All-Ireland Rail Network. Clerk, could you please read the motion?
That this Assembly recognises the transformative impact that expansion of an all-Ireland rail network will have on communities across Ireland, welcomes the commitment to an all-Ireland strategic rail review from the Executive and the Irish Government, acknowledges that the delivery of accessible, sustainable and modern rail infrastructure is a key driver of economic growth, enhances our tourism industry and will drive regionally balanced investment in left-behind communities, further acknowledges that investing in high-quality rail is critical to reaching net zero carbon emission targets by 2050, calls on the Minister for Infrastructure to provide an immediate update on the Phase 3 Derry to Coleraine Feasibility Study, and further calls on the Minister to work with the Irish Government to produce a costed implementation plan this year to deliver rail options to every county in Ireland.
Thank you. And can I call on Mr Mark Durkin to move the motion, please?
Moved.
Thank you. The Business Committee has agreed to allow up to 1 hour 30 minutes for this debate. The proposer of the motion will have 10 minutes to propose and 10 minutes to wind. As an amendment has been selected and is published on the marshalled list, the Business Committee has agreed that 15 minutes will be added to the total time for the debate. Mark, please open the debate.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I welcome the opportunity to raise this motion and to recommit to the SDLP's long-term vision to deliver an all-Ireland rail network which is not only fit for modern society, but one which abolishes historic regional disparities. Enhancing connectivity between communities will instigate the modal shift needed to reach climate goals and will deliver fairness in terms of economic growth for historically neglected regions. In government, the SDLP led the way to secure the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review alongside the Irish Government. This €30 billion plan to connect communities across borders, decarbonise public transport and deliver new opportunities set out the scale of our ambition. In opposition, we will hold the Executive to account to hold up its end, or not hold up its end, and deliver on this ambition. We have consistently extolled the many virtues of all-Ireland rail, and while there have been some gains, the failure to grasp the full, huge potential an expanded rail network would yield has stifled the island as a whole, but the North West in particular. A quick glance at the map shows the blatant disparity in rail provision between East and West, and this gap on the map is an indelible mark on the collective consciousness which suggests that the North West, is a place shut off, isolated and unsuitable for prospective visitors and investors. This stark gap is a microcosm of the wider gaps faced by the West, certainly.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I appreciate the member giving way at this stage. And he talks quite fluently about the North West being, I suppose, out of reach almost. But does he accept that at least London-Derry has a train service to it, whereas Fermanagh and Tyrone doesn't?
I thank the member for his intervention. I'm not sure of the logic behind it. You can clearly see, if he looks at this map, the North West, and Fermanagh is clearly in the North West of this map as well, and the West. That gap would have become a complete abyss had DRD and TransLink had their way over a decade ago, when they signalled it was to be the end of the line for the Derry line. But thanks to the monumental efforts of lobby group into the West, of the wider Derry public, of politicians in the SDLP and others, Mr Elliott's own past colleague, Minister Danny Kennedy, the real potential of that Derry to Belfast line was recognised. Now we want it realised. I remember my own colleague, the late John Dallett. He spoke in great detail and at great length many times in this chamber on the virtues of rail, and many people in the chamber thought he was harking back to the past, when it's evident now that he was looking back to the future, where he was going, we don't need roads. In recent years, we've seen incremental improvements, including an hourly service and the delivery of the award-winning North West Transport Hub. Those modest but transformational changes have all but eliminated any doubt cast by the naysayers about the viability of this line. Since the hourly Belfast service was introduced in 2017, we've witnessed year-on-year record-breaking passenger numbers for Derry Rail. This is the living embodiment of the phrase, if you build it, they will come. So it stands to reason, if and when we build more, even more will come. This motion calls on the Minister to get his department working on how it will be built and how the building of it will be paid for. There remains, however, blatant discrimination in terms of timetabling, with fewer trains and less frequent services than elsewhere. Derry and Fermanagh, the West, deserves accessible rail provision, hourly Sunday services, stops at City of Derry Airport, Ballykelly and Strathfoyle. Minister Mallon expanded on the New Decade New Approach commitment to high-speed cross-border connectivity to include the North West, but bizarrely, the draft report that has come forward excluded the Derry Portadown line from the 200 km/h rail speeds, condemning the route to the lowest rail speed on the island. This needs addressed in the final strategy. High-speed rail is the key to durability and success, making it a more attractive mode of transport for everyone. Why should we settle for less than everywhere else? It's simply not good enough, and the days of us in the West being second-class passengers are over. Similarly, the drawn-out wrangling around Phase 3 to Coleraine needs closure. Well, it needs commencement and completion. We have remained consistent and persistent in our desire to see delivery on these perpetually postponed rail improvements to the North's second city. Nicola Mallon put this project back on track after it hit a hazard, shall we say. She secured the feasibility study. It's long past the time that we end Derry's status as the most isolated station in the Northern Ireland rail network. This will help tackle regional imbalance and will steer the whole region on course towards a brighter future. I call on the Minister to give immediate sign-off on the feasibility study and the funding required and promised to see its delivery. It is due to start in 2025 for completion in 2027. We can't afford more slippage here. But certainly, briefly.
In terms of the extension of Phase 3, do you share with me the concerns raised in the TransLink Commission report from Aircom late last year about the rise in sea levels and the impact they're going to have not only on the Derry line but on the Carrickfergus to Larne line? By 2040, 6 locations on that line and my line will be underwater due to rising sea levels. Should that be a priority for the Minister and for TransLink going forward?
One would certainly hope that is in the public domain, so that should be factored into the costing and forward planning for the implementation of the final strategy. Derry, you'll be glad to hear me say, can't be the end of the line. However, we recognise the huge potential for infrastructure infill along the north and west coasts, connecting rural isolated areas and advancing tourism. That will rely on the restoration of rail in Tyrone and an expansion into Donegal and beyond. Connecting border regions will open up prospects right across the island. Ensuring a thriving rail network means no county can be left behind. Fermanagh should not be the only county on this island without access to rail. An Omagh, Enniskillen, Sligo link is just common sense and must be included in the strategy. It can't be set aside to a later date that never comes. That's why we've included every county as a goal in the motion. and we fear that the amendment reduces that ambition. It has taken decades to get the wheels in motion for all-island rail. It's time now to build upon the foundation blocks and recent investment from the Irish Government. I have no doubt that we can work collectively across the Chamber and across these islands to deliver these much-needed and much-demanded services. On the amendment, again, of course, we would welcome collaboration with and between the Irish and British governments to produce a cost-implemented plan to provide expertise. The NIAA report shows we could do with much more expertise in the delivery of major infrastructure projects, and we would welcome funding from anywhere, regardless of where that is. We won't turn our nose up at that. It's quite likely that this could draw funding from Europe as well, given the transfrontier nature of what we're discussing. But we have to get moving now. Too much time has already been squandered. Without question, rail is the most environmentally friendly transport option. Its success is core to achieving a greener future. Getting people out of their cars and into trains will reduce congestion and pollution.
Could the member bring his remarks to a close, please?
Certainly, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'd say that this needs to be prioritised because in our view, well, certainly in my view, this is the single most important project in terms of economic and environmental opportunities for this island.
Thank you. And can I call on Deborah Erskine to move the amendment, please?
Moved.
Thank you. You'll have 10 minutes to propose and 5 minutes to wind. All other speakers will have 5 minutes. Please open the debate on the amendment, please.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I want to thank those who brought forward the motion today on the All-Island Rail Network, though I will forgive Mark Durkin's puns there during his speech. I did enjoy them. And I want to thank them for pointing to an ambitious plan that I agree will have a transformative impact and will provide a sustainable and modern rail infrastructure which will help meet our net zero targets and will aid connectivity. From the outset today, I just want to put on record that I will be making my comments in my capacity as Fermanagh and South Tyrone DUP MLA. However, we believe that the motion could and should go further. We need to ensure that there's expertise to deliver this project and indeed to ensure adequate funding is in place to deliver. This will require the UK Government input, given the fact that the Union Connectivity Report points to increasing the provision of rail network in Northern Ireland. With that, it is important that the strategy developed between both regions matches up and is strategic. This motion is timely. A public consultation on the review's draft report completed in September 23, as all members are aware, and it is anticipated that the report will be presented to the Executive and Irish Government for approval and publication in late spring 2024, and hopefully the Minister can add to that to ensure that timescale is correct. In July 2023, the draft recommendation of the All-Island Rail Review were published, and there were some 30 recommendations. The vision of the review set out 6 high-level goals, such as contributing to decarbonisation, improve all-island connectivity between major cities, ensure regional accessibility, stimulate economic activity, encourage sustainable mobility, and achieve economic and financial feasibility. The 27th of October 2022, the Infrastructure Minister welcomed progress for the rail review and noted that he'd asked officials to explore funding opportunities for the feasibility studies into the following areas: a new rail line between Londonderry and Portadown, reopening the Knockmore line with a connection to Belfast International Airport, electrifying of the Belfast to Newry line, and better connections between the rail halt to Belfast City Airport. Of the recommendations that have been produced, they can be grouped into 4 categories: new lines, infrastructure enhancements of existing lines, or in the form of new stations and frequency improvements on the lines. All very noble and worthy recommendations. But where is Fermanagh? The county I represent is set to miss out. At present, where Fermanagh is situated on the map, there is a blank space, not one dot of rail provision in the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review. My constituency is one of the only counties in Northern Ireland, and indeed the Republic of Ireland, that will lose out should the report still stand the way it is after the consultation. And when I look, I'll give way.
I thank the member for giving way, and without wishing to be facetious, I was going to ask her where Fermanagh is in the tabled amendment.
And I am simply pointing out that I want to see Fermanagh included. I think that's an important. I don't want to take away, but I think today around this chamber we should all agree that every county in Northern Ireland should see rail provision. When I look at the report, it states anticipated demand fell below the threshold for rail on some routes, such as Clones to Sligo via Enniskillen. And I point to another section contained in the All-Ireland Rail Review. Given the relatively low population density and lack of larger towns across the region, the review has found that expansion of rail is difficult to justify in much of the region within the horizon of the review. This is totally disingenuous when you think of Northern Ireland and the fact that one county is not included. And I hope that every member of this House will reject that. What those comments speak to me is that my constituency is hard to reach and easy to forget about. We've talked about regional imbalance. Surely Fermanagh should be the starting point. There's not a single piece of rail track, and I thank my constituency colleague Tom Elliott as well for pointing that out in his intervention earlier. Not to mention, it will mean a gap of 30 years in infrastructure progression for Fermanagh and South Tyrone. It will mean my local economy will get left behind, and I'm not prepared to do that. And neither should anybody sitting in this chamber today or at an executive table. True levelling up and true commitment to decarbonisation means including every county in Northern Ireland. I know I have made the case for Fermanagh and South Tyrone in the public consultation, and others from my area have done so too. And I pay tribute to organisations like Into the West, who have fought for many years to see rail brought to areas like Fermanagh. In 2021, the capital cost of the review recommendations were estimated to be approximately £26.5 billion. And if inflation indicators were applied to those costs, it could be in the region of 29.2 to 30.7 billion. In the Union Connectivity's review final report of November 2021, it notes the opportunity of the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review, and it very clearly states the UK Government should support the Northern Ireland Executive to deliver transport infrastructure recommendations resulting from this work. Therefore, I believe the inclusion of the UK Government in this motion would strengthen our case. This particularly is the case when you look at the recommendations from the UK Connectivity Review, particularly Recommendation 12, which states that the UK Government should provide funding and major project expertise to Northern Ireland Executive to support their work with the Republic of Ireland relating to the implementation. And we have the opportunity, and when considering the transport needs of Northern Ireland, we have to give cognizance of the fact that Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom, and that as a result of this, a greater part of our economic activity is with the UK rather than the Republic. Therefore, it is natural that the UK Government would want to see levelling up in this regard. But furthermore, The UK government actually contain Fermanagh in their plans. They see Enniskillen as a place of need for rail. The All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review and the Union Connectivity Review present a clear vision for better connectivity throughout the British Isles, and full delivery of these commitments stands to unlock opportunities for economic growth and job creation within our communities. We will work constructively with the Executive and the UK and the Irish governments to this end. We must have a robust plan in place for delivery. And we've seen today from the Northern Ireland Audit Office report and the failure to deliver key projects, there is an impetus to move away from ideas phase, from aspiration to delivery. Therefore, I commend our amendment to the Chamber today. Thank you.
Thank you. Cathal?
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker, and could I welcome the opportunity to speak on the motion and the amendment today. And no doubt, whilst the previous speaker didn't say she was acting as chair, no doubt this issue will raise itself in the committee over the next while. Mr. Speaker, Sinn Féin firmly believes in the untapped potential of rail to contribute towards sustainable social, environmental and economic development across the island of Ireland. By providing efficient, reliable and more frequent connectivity, we can connect more people, cities, towns, regions and communities, as well as help us tackle the climate emergency by providing viable transport options, of which rail has a significant role to play. Our island's rail network has suffered from decades of neglect and underinvestment, with significant areas of the island still not served by rail, and adequate public transport options is not available in many areas. We need to invest in proper public transport network. 100 years of partition has severely damaged north-south connectivity. We need to look at how we can rebuild our rail network on an all-island basis. The publication of the draft rail review last year was a step in the right direction and highlights the need for increased investment in rail infrastructure. I very much welcome the funding announced last week by the Irish Government to make the Belfast to Dublin rail line an hourly service. Sinn Féin has constantly called for the improvement of this crucial rail service that workers and students use on an everyday basis and people depend on for connectivity. An hourly service will double the current frequency on this line. This rail line is incredibly popular, and the investment will help further connect communities, help tackle the climate emergency and no doubt bolster north-south links. It was also welcomed last year that the 3.3 million was to be made available for examining the cost and feasibility of electrifying the rail line from Belfast down to the border. And I also welcome the investment of 800,000 that was made available for TransLink to conduct a feasibility study on the Armagh Portadown rail link. This was following positive findings from a Council-commissioned technical study which stated the rail line would promote sustainable transport in the region. Such a rail link would improve connectivity, create greater access for jobs and opportunities, and enhance economic development for the wider area. Of course, it was frustrating for our comrades here to my right when the west of the Ban and the northwest wasn't mentioned in the funding programme. But, Mr. Speaker, we need to improve our rail network in the north, particularly west and the northwest, to unlock economic opportunities and ensure workers and families have better access to public transport. If we are serious about tackling the carbon emissions and getting people out of the cars, we need a reliable, affordable, fit-for-purpose public transport system, and rail will play a major role in that.
Thank you. I call on Peter McReynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I rise to welcome today's motion on the All-Ireland Rail Network and thank the proposer for having tabled it. Although I'm an MLA for East Belfast, my wife regularly tells me that I had great sense and wisdom to marry someone from Strabane, and complaints about rail infrastructure rail infrastructure and public transport are something I always hear when I make the journey to the northwest. As an Alliance Party infrastructure spokesperson, I have previously called for this Assembly to start thinking progressively about our infrastructure and how sustained investment into our public transport network can improve our connectivity, stimulate economic growth and tackle the all-too-real climate emergency. A new, greatly enhanced and ambitious rail network carries with it significant benefits, not just for communities across this island, but also for our shared environment. A key commitment under New Decade, New Approach, the All-Island Rail Review reflects the strategic objective to mitigate the impacts of climate change, which have been and should continue to be a priority within this Assembly. Mr Deputy Speaker, transportation is essential to the social, economic and environmental well-being of Northern Ireland, and it is essential we take steps to transform public transport networks by investing in our existing rail assets and delivering more connections. We are sadly well known for our reliance on private car usage and per road network, with 70% of all journeys here made by car and 87% of those journeys over 1 mile in distance. Transportation here is tailored to car usage, and this is reflected in the actual length of our public road network, which is over 25,000 kilometres in comparison to a rail network of 350 kilometres. Before preparing my thoughts and speech ahead of today, and to allude to what Mr Durkin said earlier, I was looking at graphics of our existing network in comparison to what the All-Island Rail Network seeks to achieve over the next few decades. And as someone who has personally lived in France, the Northern Irish lack of rail in comparison to many European cities is nothing short of a disgrace in 2024, and it needs to change. If we continue to build and maintain a system that favours car usage, the cycle of car dominance will just continue, which is shown by the number of young drivers on our roads, which has almost doubled over the last 10 years, not diminished. We will not break the monopoly on private car use because there are limited options for travel that suit the needs of our citizens. And this is where an improved and enhanced rail offering comes into things. There is no appeal to rail as an option currently when end-to-end journey times are faster by car, more reliable and more cost-effective. The delivery of an all-island rail network could see rail passenger numbers double. Nearly 750,000 people would live within 5 kilometres of a railway station, and some journey times between towns and cities could be halved. I will, yes.
One of the key issues we don't have here is connectivity to our airports. By rail, do you think it would be a game changer if we could open up International Airport, for example, and improve the tourism offering as a result of that?
And the member has another minute.
I thank the member for his intervention. And yes, I absolutely agree. And I noted whenever I was reading through it just yesterday the significant impact that it will have on City Airport in East Belfast as well. To continue better connected cities and towns through rail is precisely the type of policy this Assembly should be advocating to promote a modal shift in how people move, as well as with decarbonising the transport sector, which is the largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the United Kingdom. In previous years, expansion of the public transport network has been in line with population growth. The inadequacy of investment over the last decade means that commuters are less likely to use public transport than they had been 10 years earlier. This is a step backwards during a climate crisis and the requirement to move towards low-carbon mobility. Mr Deputy Speaker, this is an acknowledgement of the threat that climate change brings to our transport network, as was alluded to earlier by Mr Stewart. Sustained increases in temperature as well as heavy rainfall test the resilience of roads and bridges and our rail network by damaging their structural integrity. And yet there is no strategy for adapting transport infrastructure to a changing climate. It is therefore crucial to start investing in other modes of transport for the climate benefit, but also to relieve the pressure on the current network. As we head towards 2030, green infrastructure that facilitates sustainable connectivity between major cities and regions across this island must be a priority. Historically, infrastructure planning has suffered from our inconsistent politics, which ensures that the vision and ambition of potentially transformative projects are rarely delivered upon. We can no longer afford to let start-stop politics limit our efforts to move towards a low-emission transport network to mitigate the impacts of climate change. In closing, Mr Deputy Speaker, Alliance supports today's motion and we're happy to support the amendment as well. These plans, as we know, are ambitious and significant in their cost, and the more contributors willing to dig deep to fund it, for the better. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on John Stewart.
I thank the proposers of both the motion and the amendment for bringing this forward today, and we will be supporting both. Mr Deputy Speaker, our rail network here has been the victim of chronic underinvestment over many years, both in terms of the existing infrastructure, diversification from carbon-emitting fleet, but particularly the lack of network in the west of the province. To be clear, Mr Deputy Speaker, the Ulster Unionist Party are fully supportive of the ambitious plans set out in the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review, particularly how the rail network can be developed sustainably to improve connectivity between major cities and towns, enhance regional accessibility, including to the North West, enhance transport integration, reduce carbon emissions and support balanced economic growth and development. The recommendations, if delivered, will help to deliver a greener economy, including a model shift towards public and sustainable forms of transport. It will support decarbonisation of the rail network here, including a gradual shift to electrification of the network and the use of hydrogen-powered trains. And I note, Mr Deputy Speaker, that Northern Ireland is the only part of Europe, I believe, without any form of electrification of the lines to date, and that's something we definitely need to look forward towards. Further, it has the ability to deliver an accessible, efficient, safe and sustainable transport system that supports communities, households and businesses here. The proposals for additional stations throughout the country, particularly the west of the country, could be a game changer for connectivity, tourism and economic development, as would the long-term proposals for a 125 miles an hour line between Newry and Lisburn and the 1 hour service between Belfast and Dublin. And as has already been said, ultimately, as a result of this, up to 700,000 people across Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic would live within 5 kilometres of a railway station if it was followed through. The expansion as well, Mr Deputy Speaker, as I've said, would need to include access to our airports. The cost of airport car parking is prohibitive, significant, and there's a monopoly almost being established there because of the lack of connectivity, particularly to Belfast International Airport, but also to Belfast City. And by broadening that up as part of the union connectivity, we might also see additional routes being implemented as a result of that coming in from mainland UK, but also an all-island tourism benefit, being able to travel up from Dublin and fly out from further afield from Belfast, and that, as I say, could be a game changer. I want to now touch, Mr Deputy Speaker, just on a few of the issues. It's already been discussed by Ms Erskine about the cost of that and how prohibitive that would be. A £31 billion assessment at this stage, with upwards of a 25% contribution from the executive here. It is essential, Mr Deputy Speaker, that this is properly costed to assess the overall viability of that, particularly in light of the additional costs that were highlighted today by the Audit Office in terms of how infrastructure projects run forward. And I would also welcome an input, as has been already said, around the union connectivity strategy and an input from the His Majesty's Government on this as well. I think they have a key role to play. Secondly, Mr Deputy Speaker, is deliverability. The entire project is likely to span in excess of 25 years, and in order to do that, we need to see a commitment that extends over 5 mandates and at least 5 ministers from across several parties. We would therefore need to see a maturity of government that we have struggled to find in the past if we are able to see truly transformative services, and that is the same across all departments, whether we're looking at health and the transformation of care or in massive infrastructure projects. There needs to be a grown-up approach into how we do this over a series of years. Absolutely.
Just on that point, and I agree with a lot of what he said and his point around the fact that we need stability, institutional and political stability to deliver big things, whether it's health reform or growth in the rail network. Would he agree with me that it would be helpful if the First and Deputy First Minister would confirm they won't resign for the rest of this mandate? And would he support us and others in this chamber who want to work towards reform?
The Minister has an extra minute, and could, when you're making an intervention, can you actually have it about the topic of rail, please?
Thank you for that promotion, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'll take the paycheck as well, if I can have it. Not quite there yet. But yeah, I absolutely do. Sustainability is key. Whatever it is we're looking at, particularly the massive infrastructure projects over a number of years, undoubtedly we're going to need consistency of government and continuity of government, and that will be vital in terms of achieving that. So I absolutely do agree with the member. Thirdly, and it's already been alluded to as well, the absence of Fermanagh from the All-Ireland Rail Review is totally unacceptable, Mr Deputy Speaker, and needs to be corrected. The extension of a rail line to Fermanagh is imperative for sustained economic growth and connectivity, and would be vital to alleviating congestion on Fermanagh roads, allowing fabricators and manufacturers to use rail freight instead of to aid in transportation. And I would welcome a commitment from the Minister on this issue going forward. Finally, Mr Deputy Speaker, the motion, and we agree with this, calls on Phase 3 of the Derry Coleraine Feasibility Study. We do have no problem with that, and it would be vital to secure faster and more reliable journeys to the North West. But it would be remiss, as I've already pointed out, not to factor in the serious and concerning revelations of a recent assessment and report carried out for TransLink that says that on 7 areas on both the Carrickfergus to Larne line in my constituency and the London-Derry line, that by 2040 will be underwater as a result of rising sea levels and coastal change. Hopefully all members in the House and the Minister agree with me that this will happen within the lifetime of this proposed strategic review, and it is vital that we look at how we're going to assess that impact on our infrastructure and network so that we can tackle that, because the last thing we want to see are those key services, as in having what we hold, those going underwater without a strategic plan to address them. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much indeed. Colin Park-Delarky, please.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I want to address this in 3 separate points. The first issue which I want to deal with is the All-Ireland Rail Review. So for me and for my party, we welcome that as a key strategic part in putting things in the right direction here, and in looking at rail across this island on a strategic platform and an opportunity to work together. We've all seen the comparison map between 1920 and 2020, the decrease in rail over that time, and we have to look at partition as essential in making that happen. Partition has decreased not only the quality of rail on our island, but the quantity of rail on our island as well. So we have the opportunity now to work together, to advance that and to move in the right direction on this. Secondly, I want to touch on the Union Connectivity Review. I have to say, contrary to what other members have said today, I was very disappointed by that. I was disappointed to see that the West was neglected in that. And I think that that really reinforced the 2-tier system which we have at the minute, which is rail east of the Ban, strengthened, and rail west of the Ban, which continues to be ignored. I did expect to see Phase 3 of the Derry to Belfast line on that. I expected to see greater detail on that. And I think that that really emphasises the third point for me, which is about having local ministers in place, people who understand rail here, who get the geography of this place and who really want to change that for the better. You see, it's good for us to have a minister in place. It's better for us to have a Sinn Féin minister in place, because particularly for Derry and for the North West, a Sinn Féin infrastructure minister means delivery. We looked at 2016, we see Chris Hazard, his day one priority was to get the A6 built. That has now happened. John has made very clear that his day one priority is to get the A5 built, and I really welcome the fact that we've seen great progress on that this week, with continued funding and continued commitment from the Irish Government, which has been increased. I do think, no I won't, sorry. So I do think that it's important that we see that continuing. A minister is now in place who's committed to increasing connectivity, who's committed to improving public transport, who's committed to investment and the increasing opportunity for Derry in the North West. We all have to welcome that as a positive step.
Thank you, Parag. Call on Stephen Dunn.
There's no doubt transport connectivity and a modern and accessible rail network is very vital to our economic growth, job creation, developing tourism, building houses and social cohesion. And that connectivity is crucially important, whether that be east-west or indeed north-south. I very much welcome the commitment within the Union Connectivity Report launched in late 2021 by the UK Government, which stated a key priority was to improve connectivity with Northern Ireland through better transport infrastructure, better rail capacity and journey times, better rail connections to airports and participation in the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review. The Connectivity Report also recommends that the UK Government looks at providing funding and major project expertise to our executive to support their work with the Republic of Ireland relating to the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review, which is indeed very welcome. It's clear that our current rail network is outdated, as has been said by quite a number of members here this morning, and it is in real need of investment. And I welcome the opportunity to support this motion as amended, as we look at ensuring our public transport system is fit for purpose for today and for the future. Improvements to connectivity to our single largest trade market in Great Britain is just as important as investing in cross-border rail projects. And indeed, in our agreement with the Government, that is why we ensured there were commitments to improve the physical connections that link Northern Ireland to Great Britain, including through delivering the A75 improvements and through a new £10 million fund to boost investment within our ports. The report today from the Northern Ireland Audit Office, which my colleague Mrs Erskine has mentioned, which stated that the delivery of major public infrastructure projects here will cost almost £2.5 billion more than planned after analysing 77 projects across various Northern Ireland departments is a real and stark reminder of the very real fiscal challenges which exist today with major infrastructure projects like what we have been discussing here today. As we move hopefully closer towards the delivery stage of these potential improvements, it is imperative that contributions from our UK Treasury are discussed before bringing forward a costed implementation plan. With a rough cost estimate for NI-related projects recommended by the draft review report equating to over £5 billion back in 2021 prices, it would be foolish to believe that the Executive could support these projects without the aid of the UK Government, and it is within this respect the absence of any reference to the UK Government in the original SDLP motion is peculiar, to say the least. As an MLA for North Down, I see the very real value and importance to our economy that having a rail link which is used by thousands of commuters every day to and from Belfast city centre and beyond. From figures I received from TransLink this week, during the year 21-22, there were over 320,000 journeys using the Bangor to Belfast rail line, and that figure in 22-23 increased to over 540,000 journeys, confirming the demand that exists for rail travel into the city centre and beyond. Yes, certainly.
Just conscious of that, I mean, same for Carrickfergus line as it is to Bangor. One of the key aspects we need to see is an increase in the nighttime economy. There's a lot of limited access both in trains and rail, or trains and buses. Do you agree with me that we should see an increase in those in the evening time to try and boost the city economy?
And the member has an extra minute.
Yes, I thank the member, Mr. Stewart, for that intervention. I do agree with him. I think there is greater potential, to do more with even the rail link that does exist at the minute and build on that, including greater frequency of our trains and indeed more routes and stops as well. So, and that ties in with the next point just around how it is alarming that since the 1950s our rail network has been cut by almost 450 miles. An alarming statistic indeed, and we have suffered historical underinvestment in our rail network compared to the Republic of Ireland and also to other regions of our United Kingdom. I very much also welcome the focus on improving connectivity to our 3 airports here, including the George Best Belfast City Airport, which neighbours within my own constituency and is a vital part of our connectivity to the rest of the UK and beyond into Europe. Through the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review, we do have an opportunity to address the decades of underinvestment in our rail network, and I trust that the Minister will take action on this and support bringing our public transport system in line with the rest of the UK. I support this motion as amended, as we seek to improve our rail infrastructure and make it fit for purpose for our future. It is my hope that these improvements will be accompanied by similar investment in our roads network, ports and airports, as we seek to make Northern Ireland an even more attractive place to live, work and invest in. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much indeed. I call on Patrick Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and as an Alliance Infrastructure spokesperson, can I take the opportunity to welcome this motion and indeed the amendment. Rail services are an important driver of our economy, key to enhancing connectivity and social capital, particularly in rural towns and villages currently underserved by public transport options. Oxford Economics estimates that for every £1 spent on rail in the UK, £2.50 is generated in the wider economy. And it is a fact that the expansion of new lines can bring a significant boost and breathe life into previously declining urban centres. Investing in our public rail infrastructure is also a vital step in reducing our carbon footprint and achieving our decarbonisation goals by 2050. And it's particularly positive that the All-Ireland Rail Review sets out plans for the electrification of new and existing lines. It is also vitally important that we continue to work with our colleagues in the Irish Government to deliver cross-border schemes and leverage the value of that North-South partnership, which was demonstrated clearly through last week's positive announcements around the A5 Casement Park, Narrowwater Bridge and other projects. Now, with no offence whatsoever to buses and other forms of public transport, there is nothing quite like rail travel in terms of efficiency, comfort and seeing beautiful parts of the world zip by the window. And indeed, the rail network on the island of Ireland runs... Yes, certainly.
Fully understand, Deputy Speaker, and appreciate what he's saying, but would he accept that if you don't have a rail line, it's very difficult to enjoy the benefits of rail travel?
And the member has another minute.
The member will enjoy the next part of my paragraph as I come to that very issue. Alas, growing up in South Down, it is not something I was personally able to enjoy on a regular basis, with my constituency lacking any active public railway, and I believe that we are unique in this, along with Strangford and Mid-Ulster as the only constituencies not included or not touched by the All-Ireland Review, and can therefore empathise with our I said constituencies. But I can empathise with our friends in Fermanagh as the only county excluded from the review. Whilst we may lack a public rail network, my constituency is home to Ireland's only full-size heritage railway, the Downpatrick and County Down Railway, a volunteer-led organisation who do incredible work to promote the history and heritage of rail. And I think it's important, given this opportunity, to recognise them in this debate, in addition to other heritage railways at Foyle Valley and Bushmills, because this motion references the role that rail plays in enhancing tourism, and we must recognise the fact that railways are a draw for tourists in and of themselves, not just as a means of transport. And while I understand the need for the review to focus on connectivity between main towns and cities, it is important that we do not forget about heritage railways and the forgotten track beds that are scattered across our countryside, in many cases grown over, divided by new roads and housing, or repurposed for greenways and cycle paths. Whilst there is no problem in principle with these developments, it is somewhat sad that no statutory protections exist for disused railway lines and the important heritage that they represent. And a worthy spin-off of the All-Ireland Review could be to look at how we better utilise and care for these important historical assets. The Department for Infrastructure could perhaps begin by looking at how, in partnership with local councils, it adequately supports the operation of heritage railway associations, for example. But I thank the proposers for bringing this motion and those who brought the amendment as well, and I'm happy to give it my full support.
Thank you, and I call on you, Murphy, please.
And I want to take the opportunity to speak on this motion today, and I thank the proposers of the motion. Over the last number of weeks in this chamber, I have heard a lot about regional imbalance in the North West. For decades, our local economy in Fermanagh has been stifled due to the lack of investment and infrastructure in place. Tourism is a key economic driver for many businesses in our towns and villages, from Lisnaskea, Enniskillen, Belcoo to Roslay. And with the right type of investment, we can truly unlock our full potential. I'm incredibly lucky to have grown up beside the beautiful shores of Lough Erne, and I would be delighted for our local tourism economy to grow so that people can experience our own beautiful part of this island and to see what we have to offer. It is clear that we need to improve our public transport network, particularly in the North West, in order to unlock economic opportunities and improve connectivity for workers and families. We also need to improve our road infrastructure. And on this, I warmly welcome Minister O'Dowd's announcement last week to deliver the long-awaited A4 Enniskillen bypass. This investment will make a significant impact by cutting down journey times, as well as traffic and pollution in Enniskillen town centre. This will be an economic driver for Enniskillen and indeed for Fermanagh more generally. On the issue of rail, there has been much frustration and disappointment in County Fermanagh that the draft All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review did not recommend connections for the county. The only county where rail provision is not recommended. No, not at the minute. Improving public transport in Fermanagh is vital for allowing communities and towns in the county to thrive and prosper and to address regional imbalance. We also need to invest in our public transport to help tackle the climate emergency, as it will have a very important role in tackling emissions and pollution. On this, I appreciate the Minister will take time to fully consider the All-Ireland Rail Review, and I am confident in developing his departmental plan for the future delivery of rail in the north and across the island, that he will look to ensure that the rail service works for and benefits everyone, including people of Fermanagh.
Thank you very much indeed, and I thank the member. The Business Committee has arranged to meet at 1 o'clock today, and therefore I propose by leave of the Assembly to suspend the sitting until 2 p.m. The debate will continue after question time, when the next member will be called will be Gary Middleton. The sitting is by leave suspended.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I welcome the opportunity to speak today in support of the amendment put forward in the name of our party. Since the 1950s, the Northern Ireland Rail Network has been cut by some 450 miles. It is evident that we have suffered historical underinvestment in our rail network and services in comparison with regions across the United Kingdom. We do not have any railway electrification currently, and there are clear disparities in access of services in specific areas, particularly the North West and Fermanagh as well. There is no doubt that it is unacceptable that such a disparity in services exists across Northern Ireland in terms of rail network, but also across our infrastructure network in general. It is for this reason that the DUP recognises that the Union Connectivity Review and the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review presents a real opportunity and a vision to improve connectivity throughout the British Isles, benefiting our economies and unlocking growth and job opportunities which should benefit all of our communities. The motion that's brought forward itself does little to reflect the importance of both the Union Connectivity Review and the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review, nor does it make any reference at all to the UK Government and the need for funding investment. As my Fermanagh colleague Ms Erskine said, we need to move beyond the ideas phase. We need to move from ambitions onto delivery. So despite the absence of this in the original motion, there also needs to be a recognition of available executive allocations going forward. The DUP has long championed the full implementation of the Union Connectivity Review, recognising the importance that good transport and connectivity can have across the United Kingdom on economic growth, jobs and all aspects of our society. The Union Connectivity Report welcomed the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review, and it's important to see that in the context of this British Isles-wide approach. The £5 million allocation by the Government in response to the Connectivity Review is welcome, but it goes nowhere near far enough to make the progress and preparation needed for real change. The previous Infrastructure Minister's ambivalence to that review may go some way to explaining the lack of progress on the North West and indeed the Enniskillen project as well. As a party, we will commit to work closely with the UK Government and the Irish Government and indeed the Minister to ensure that these projects get off the ground as soon as possible and that we're able to deliver the infrastructure that Northern Ireland needs and deserves. When I first entered politics back in 2010, the city that I represent, the change has been incredible in terms of the Peace Bridge, the new greenways, the first fully electric metro bus service in the UK. These are positive changes, and what we need to see now is greater progress in terms of our rail connectivity. We do need an urgent update on the Phase 3 London-Derry to Coleraine Feasibility Study. It is encouraging to see the delivery of the North West Transport Hub. However, more can and should be done. We also need better connectivity between our airports and our seaports. This can be done with investment which will deliver long-term benefits economically and environmentally as well. The restoration of the railway line from Londonderry to Portadown would link the towns of Strabane, Omagh and Dungannon, providing an opportunity for greater connectivity across the province. There is also an acceptance in the draft All-Ireland Rail Review report that individual projects will need further feasibility studies and environmental assessments. There is no doubt that significant amounts of funding will be required to move things forward, but we must invest in order that we can reap the benefits going forward. In closing, Mr Deputy Speaker, I would like to pay tribute to all of the many campaigners over the years who have put in the effort and voiced their concerns. I include Into the West in that, who have been at the forefront in their campaigns, and we look forward to working with the Minister going forward to see some of this stuff come to reality. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, and I call Colin Gilder now.
And I look forward to hearing the debate, and I was listening in earlier on. It was, extremely foolhardy to see rail taken out of parts of Tyrone. And in South Tyrone, in the South Tyrone part of Fermanagh South Tyrone, we had a connection through Dungannon and the Moy, and we also had another connection through Caledon, and that's all gone. And I mean, it's left our county bereft of any rail whatsoever, and I know Fermanagh has been left out of the strategic review, both of which I think need to be addressed. So I just would ask the Minister in his remarks to comment upon the fact that these rail connections are not just an economic driver, they're also a social connection, and they link communities in a way that we now realise actually is much more environmentally and economically beneficial than perhaps was at a time.
And I call on David Hunniford.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. As Alliance Economy spokesperson, I welcome this motion and the amendment, and I speak to the motion from an economy point of view and delivering connectivity across this island that is needed to renew and to reshape our economy and to grow, provide growth and create jobs here in the north of the island. Good connectivity and infrastructure enables the economy to grow. It sets the platform on which our economic growth can be built. The Belfast-Dublin Economic Corridor is vital to that expansion, and as a member for Lagan Valley, I also want to see that growth in my own constituency with the development of new economic zones in Blaris and into the Mace Long Kesh site, which are connected on the island and would also support the economic regional balance. The All-Island Review, if realised, would help deliver on the vital strategic economic growth here, and also importantly help to encourage further tourism north and building on the 70% of our tourists that fly into Dublin Airport. Belfast International Airport, the rail connection, is also vital to the connectivity of the business community, for tourism and for my constituents in the village that the line passes through. Given that Dublin Airport is practically a capacity and passenger numbers there's also an opportunity for Belfast, for both airports here, to capture the significant growth in numbers and realign passenger numbers across the island, which would create the opportunity for new routes and new markets locally. The hourly service between Belfast and Dublin is also a key to having a frequent, reliable service that will attract more growth and boost our economy, and that is absolutely vital if we're to change how people travel and create modal shift, and connectivity is absolutely key. Ultimately, what I'm saying is the public transport is a driver of economic opportunity. It's not solely purely environmental terms, but our climate change commitments for 2030 and beyond are critical, and there's a critical need for the Minister to focus on that modal shift across Northern Ireland. Government investment in transport over a sustained period has been seriously lacking, but with the new Grand Central station development underway, I hope that that's the first phase of delivery on this and a change of direction. I would also make a point that while welcoming the review, it is a pity that it's limited solely to just the rail review and didn't also include a rapid transport or transit once you reach each city. This could have been included, and the development of further linkage systems such as the expansion of the glider network in Belfast, and potentially looking at similar networks like the glider in other towns and cities where this would also improve the network, increasing connectivity and encouraging economic growth there, again supporting the economic regional rebalance. But it's not just of how you link towns and cities together, it's also linking places of learning together, places of work and medical centres. But it's also when you arrive of how you move to complete your journey. So let's be ambitious and be confident in our ability and open to opportunities to look to grow. That is something I feel has been missed and something the Minister should look seriously at. So, for example, in my own constituency in Lagan Valley, a simple glider route like as in Belfast, and this will replicate across other places where train links end, but a simple link in Lisburn is something that could connect the train station to major industry, to health centre, to schools, to retail centres, allowing people to move quickly across the area. Absolutely.
Thank you, Member, for giving way there. I'm just wondering where the glider route would go in Fermanagh.
The member has another minute and still no glider. Thank
the member for the extra minute. I I absolutely support support that Fermanagh has been missed in this, and we should be looking to see how that would configure. But I do take the point of the glider. It is something that we can use. Rather than a bus service which is from centre to source, it crosses a town or a city and could be used to effect, and I have no doubt it could be used in Enniskillen, in his area. But 2028 is a mark in our diaries, and hosting the Euros gives us the focus of mind to deliver at least the low-hanging fruit of this all-island plan in time for that tournament, and it should focus our minds. The Circle line, or the Knockmore line from Lisburn to Antrim that connects the airport, should be reopened and should happen for the Euro tournament. The delivery of the new fleet of Dublin Enterprise trains running on the hour, another that should be placed to allow visiting fans travelling and coming to this island to travel between Belfast and Dublin very simply and very quickly. That would be a start, and at least we could start to move towards delivery of this transport policy, and at least the legacy of the Euros would be left for generations to come. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much indeed. I call Mr. Alan Robinson.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I very much welcome the opportunity to speak in what I and many see as a vital public service. Our rail and bus networks throughout Northern Ireland are a lifeline to thousands, especially those who avail of the Smart Pass. As an MLA representing the North West, I know that we are largely left behind in terms of investment per head of population or public transport. Since the 1950s, the Northern Ireland rail network has been cut from 754 to 297 miles. Many areas are cut off from the rail network following the closure of their local railway line or station more than 5 decades ago. 6% of workers travel using public transport, whilst 82% travel to work by car, the highest of any UK region. When travelling to work in the rest of the United Kingdom, public transport is used by 18% of workers, and just 68% of workers commute by car. I do want to pay tribute to those ministers who in the past had the foresight to save the London-Derry to Belfast line. I know in the not-so-distant past there was pressure to close the line between Coleraine and London-Derry, and I'm very much glad that that did not happen, and that since we have seen an uptake in people using our rail network. The fact passengers can travel from Belfast to Dublin by train in just over 2 hours, while it takes about the same time to travel between Belfast and London-Derry, despite being a significantly shorter distance, highlights the significant regional imbalance. It is almost twice as fast to travel by road between Belfast and London-Derry than by rail. Over 3 million journeys were made on the London-Derry railway line in 2019, showing a clear demand for good transport links to and from this region. I would like to highlight that the proposers of this motion have failed to mention within the body of their motion another important report, the Union Connectivity Report, published a short while back. And this report should be embraced by our executive and the Minister. That report highlighted the huge task at hand for public transport. That report highlighted that in 2017-18, local transport and rail received funding of £84 per head, the lowest of all the regions of the UK, and at 27% of the UK average expenditure. Public transport in Northern Ireland has experienced decades of underinvestment, leaving some elements of public transportation unable to adequately meet current and potential user needs, and this contributes to the reliance on private rather than public transport. Northern Ireland has a less extensive rail network than many regions and nations of the UK. In addition to long-term planning and funding, people will need to feel that public transport options are fast, affordable, safe, modern, and more importantly, available for the journeys that they make. This will require the Executive to have a long-term transport infrastructure plan with the backing of the UK Government to provide confidence that funding will be available to deliver it. I would like to state from an East Londonderry point of view that I believe that there should be a new railway halt in the North West to promote its role as an economic hub and specifically to Londonderry Airport. And as part of the future investment being considered from Londonderry to Belfast and beyond, that a Limavady spur should be examined. And can I just end by saying that the success of the Ballerina Holt investment has shown that the approach of build it and they will come has paid off. But I do implore the Minister to please get on with providing the long-awaited new upgrade to the current car parking facilities at Ballerina. Thank you.
Thank you. I call Matthew O'Toole.
Thank you to my colleague Mark Durkin for bringing this motion to the Assembly today. We can hear the engagement, we can hear the breadth of interest and passion that the subject of our rail network, its past, its frustrating at times present, and its huge potential future brings. And what we're debating today is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to look again at how we move people and goods, and the goods part's important, across this island. We can all look back, and it's important that we do look back to a century of, frankly, devastation on our rail network on this island, particularly in the north of this island, particularly, but not exclusively, in relation to cross-border lines. We can all regret, if we drive down the road, we can't actually get the train from here, even though the old Downpatrick and County Down Railway that runs to my hometown of Downpatrick, was mentioned earlier on, is now the Cumber Greenway. If we drive down the dual carriageway, we get to the old the Ulster Transport Museum in Coleraine, and we can look at the map as it slowly withers, as lines, connections, and opportunity slowly dries up and dropped off over the 20th century. This, to my knowledge, is the first time a chamber on these islands has discussed a strategic investment plan for the rail network on this island in more than a century. So, as well as looking back, it's important that we look forward to a 21st century, I hope, of new connections and possibility. In the last century, we have seen, as I said, decades of scaling back of our network, and even as recently as 20 years ago, we closed the line from Lisburn to Antrim, which was mentioned before by Mr Honeyford. And of course, as others have said, Tyrone, Fermanagh, Donegal, Monaghan and Cavan have lost their rail networks entirely. And I will come on to the Fermanagh point because it's an important one, and it's one of the reasons why we have some difficulty with the amendment. In the last 20 years, we have seen the tide begin to turn. The Belfast and Derry line, which has been referenced multiple times, has seen its transport, the numbers grow, and people have regularly used the famous phrase from Field of Dreams: if they build it and they will come. In the most recent stats available, the NI Railways network saw almost 13 million passengers use its service, while the pre-COVID high, 15 million, also marked a high in NI Railways' 50 years of existence. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, as an island, we are among the most car-dependent regions in Western Europe, with almost 70% of journeys in the north being made by car, while only 2% of journeys are made by public transport. That is, bluntly, shameful. And it's our fault, as legislators, as people who do public policy, for not providing that option for our people. Between 2005 and 2015, capital spending on the railway network amounted to just £22 a head. That is far behind Great Britain, who spend five times as much over the same period. Our railways have thrived in spite of some of the underfunding from previous generations. They have thrived not just because people want to use them, but because of the dedicated work of campaigners, including Into the West, which has been mentioned. I am proud there was an SDLP minister, Nicola Mallon, the previous executive, who announced and drove forward, no pun intended, perhaps I shouldn't use the verb to drive, the All-Island Rail Review forward. The Department of Infrastructure and Department of Transport in the South published their draft report last year, which estimated a £31 billion investment over the next few decades. Now, our motion today is not about saying all this is going to be done today, this week or next year, Minister. It's about saying we need to start the work now. You and your officials need, and I hope you will, go away and start the work of planning and costing this plan, and that is what this motion is all about. The deep, profound structural challenges of regional imbalance and climate change that we've talked about today demand no less. That vision in the All-Island Strategic Rail Review is one that can inspire us across this island. Let me just say briefly in relation to the amendment, because it's come up a couple of times, the difficulty we have with it is not really anything that's actually in the text of the amendment itself, because it's pretty unobjectionable. The difficulty is in what it takes out of our original amendment. And a critical few words in our amendment is every county in Ireland, which would include Fermanagh, the wonderful, glorious Lakeland county of Fermanagh. Your amendment removes Fermanagh, I'm afraid, through the chair, Ms Erskine. So I'm afraid that's why we have some difficulty, not because of any views we have in the Union Connectivity Review. There are some positive things in that, but it's actually to do with, I'm happy to give way if the member wants to.
dramatic pause. I
Go ahead.
I thank the member for giving way. I mean, it should be a given that we should be promoting every county in Northern Ireland, and I think the member would understand that surely it's a given that we would want to promote every county in Northern Ireland, as we have indicated, and indeed, the UK, the connectivity report actually does say about Fermanagh and the county in it. So.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Well, look, I think it isn't a given, I'm afraid, and I think it is important that we are clear that we need to, that our original motion, not, as I say, I'm not disputing lots of what's in the amendment. Most of what's in the amendment is sensible, but it does remove the reference to every county in Ireland, not just Northern Ireland, because this is an all-island real view, and that does matter to us and others, because this is about an all-island context. There is a both islands context, which we acknowledge, but I'm afraid because of the change that it renders to our motion, we have difficulty with it. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in drawing my remarks to a close, this is something that is inspirational. This is something that should allow our people, particularly our young people, to look beyond a horizon which is not just anxiety about the climate emergency and frustration at the limitations of politics here, but something we can do that's transformational. Not just a modal shift out of cars into transport, not just connecting this island up in a way that we haven't seen before, but actually something that politics can do, something transformational and hopeful. This is long-term stuff, and why else do we seek office? Why else do we get into politics other than to do things like this? So I urge
could the member bring
members
his
to support
remarks
our
to a
motion.
close?
We spend a lot of time in the past, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in this place. Let's start building the future.
Call Justin McNulty.
I am pleased to have the opportunity to support this motion today, and I thank the motion bringers, my SDLP party colleagues, Matthew O'Toole, Mark Durkin, Sinead McLaughlin and Danny McCrossan. The All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review, commissioned by our former Infrastructure Minister, Nicola Mallon, presented a once-in-a-generation opportunity to transform rail infrastructure on this island, and it's heartening that the groundwork laid down by Minister Mallon is now taking shape. The spectrum of opportunities contained within the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review will provide a huge social, environmental and economic uplift for communities, the length and breadth of this island. For people in my own constituency, the re-establishment of rail connectivity to Armagh City will be a game-changer for commuters travelling to both Belfast and Dublin, and the enhancement of capacity at services from Derry will help to close the gap of disadvantage that commuters in Derry currently face relative to their counterparts in other parts of the north. Beyond enhancing commuter connectivity, full implementation of this report would mark a quantum leap forward, empowering ordinary people to push back against the climate crisis. Full implementation of this report would forge an unprecedented partnership approach between the government and ordinary people in decarbonising our society and transitioning away from unsustainable transport practices. Every one of us has heard ad infinitum of the pressing need to take individual responsibility for the environmental challenges we face. But quite often, ordinary people are left uncertain as to how behavioural changes on their part can have a meaningful impact upon the crisis. Therein lies a fundamental challenge in meaningfully combating the climate crisis. The fact that there is a responsibility on the part of the government to provide citizens with the necessary tools to play their part in addressing that climate crisis. That is what the review provides, transformative investment to make sustainable practices accessible to all. In addition to the environmental impact of this transformation, the potential for a profound social and economic uplift must be seized as well. Take tourism, for example. International tourists travelling to this island overwhelmingly arrive in Dublin Airport as the point of entry. Without adequate infrastructure to access areas like the Ring of Gullion, the Mourne Mountains, the Glens of Antrim, and the ancient city of Armagh, the size of the economic footprint left by international tourists will inevitably be diminished. In that respect, implementation of this review serves to facilitate regional equity and ensures that every nook and cranny of our island is accessible to overseas visitors, not just urban centres. The tangible social impact of implementation is something to be welcomed also. Implementation of this review will bring jobs and investment to parts of the north that are crying out for it. Through laying new lines, building new stations, manufacturing new equipment and transport infrastructure, beyond that it will address the significant and stubborn issues with respect to rural isolation.
At present, transport infrastructure for people in places like Derry, News and rural County Armagh don't provide reliable access to urban centres. It leaves people with no option but to use their car to get from A to B. I think particularly of our elderly generation and the social isolation that reality causes, especially if they have limited or no access to private transport. Whether it is visiting friends or family, travelling to a theatre, family trip to the zoo, or undertaking a trip to have dinner with your grandchildren at university, the cost of a taxi is prohibitive. And if you do have a car of your own, more often than not, driving to the nearest train station seems pointless because by the time you get there, you're already 60% of the way there to your destination. The real and tangible difference that an overhaul in rail connectivity could bring for people in isolated rural areas would be immeasurable. Count Corley, I have already acknowledged the sterling work of former infrastructure, my SDLP colleague Nicola Mallon, in having the leadership to commission this review. The recommendations contained within it are far-reaching and transformational. The investment required to realise its full potential is significant, but 75% of the capital commitment coming from the Irish Government. This is truly a once-in-a-generation opportunity to restore Ireland's rail infrastructure. If I have one message for the Infrastructure Minister today, it would be to grasp this opportunity with both hands. Progress this report at pace, this project at pace, and ensure that the transformational impact of this strategic rail review is felt in communities in every part of the North. And like you, Minister, we may not see it, I may not see it, but we must build a legacy for the future. I take a line from Seamus Mallon, my predecessor, in his book, A Shared Home Place. A society grows great when old men and women plant trees in whose shade they will never sit. Gurma Yogut, Count Corley.
As it's indicated, there is only one remaining member to speak. I've decided to exercise the grace period in accordance with Standing Order 17.4. Over to you, Jerry Carroll.
Deputy Speaker, I hope that trend continues, but thank you. I think the State of Ireland's rail network is the perfect representation of the ruling class delusion. It's a delusion that says spending cuts and the managed decline of public services is not only financially prudent, but also necessary to inspire confidence in business elites and stimulate economic growth. And people will no doubt be familiar, I think it was referred to earlier, about the British civil servant Richard Beeching, who led the charge in cutting railway services in Britain, and the same cuts were then imposed on people in the north. And like much else emanating, Deputy Speaker, from London's political elite, it has been an unmitigated disaster for working class communities. If you look at the experience of the North West and of rural communities, which have been virtually cut off from the rail network, you can see the effects of these nonsensical policies. First of all, it must be said that public spending cuts, including cuts to public transport, have been absolutely devastating for deprived areas right across this island. And secondly, the impact of a broken public transport network on a daily basis is wreaking havoc on people's health and on our environment. Deputy Speaker, people here will know air pollution is amongst the biggest killers worldwide, responsible for over 7 million deaths every single year. Not only is it slashing years of people's lives, but it's also cost the NHS billions of pounds every single year to treat people, often poor people, impacted by respiratory diseases and cancer. So while governments across these islands, including this executive, cut public transport spending, they're costing the public purse more money in the long run, not to mention the cost on people's health. The Tories, for their part, have spent around $4 billion a year on fuel duty cuts, incentivising the use of private cars whilst privatising the public transport network. But it's not just the Tories, Deputy Speaker. Time and again we've seen Translink fares hiked and services reduced in real terms. Last year, in the middle of a cost of living crisis, one of the worst ones ever, Translink fares were disgracefully hiked. And the decline of public transport is happening on Stormont's watch. And as we speak, the Department for Infrastructure is considering ending, limiting, restricting free travel for over 60s. And I would call the Minister today to bin this proposal. People have made it clear their opposition to this proposal through protests and through thousands of submissions to the Permanent Secretary before he was in office. So bin that proposal. All the science, Deputy Speaker, tells us we should be encouraging more people to use public transport to cut emissions, as people have said, and avert climate catastrophe. And this Stormont seems to be heading in the complete opposite direction. Whereas other countries are moving to free, total free public transport, and heavily, in some cases, public transport, we're hurtling towards disaster in the opposite direction. Analysis shows that Belfast is the most car-dependent city in the UK, with more than 70% of all journeys in the north, in Belfast rather, taken by car. We need to urgently turn the tide if we are to meet our climate emission targets. We'll be supporting the motion today, obviously. The need for an All-Ireland railway system couldn't be more stark, but this kind of expansion cannot be coupled with austerity measures, taken with the one hand and cutting with the other, which will simultaneously discourage the use of public transport, impact on people's health and impact on our environment. And we need to address all these issues if we're to move toward a public transport network that is free at the point of service and paid for through progressive taxation. And in terms of the amendment, I generally support more demands on the British government. They've underfunded this place for decades, and any sort of pressure on them is good. But the amendment takes into pressure the focus off the Department for Infrastructure. Maybe that's an executive tactic by executive parties. Maybe it's a mistake, I don't know. But for our end, I think it's problematic for that reason, and we can't support it, and we're happy to support the motion unamended. Thank you.
Thank you. And Minister, you have 15 minutes.
First of all, I would like to thank the SDLP for raising the debate on the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review and the future of rail services across the island, and to the DUP for bringing forward their amendment. I'm keen that we are ambitious around our rail network and maximise the potential of rail to support social and economic development and the environmental sustainability of our transport system. The Rail Review is an ambitious piece of work which has the potential to transform our rail network. It offers an opportunity to deliver real and lasting change for people, communities and our island economy through faster speeds and greatly improved frequency, new routes, particularly across the west and north, and widening accessibility, connectivity across the island. The benefits of enhanced rail connections are many. Investment in the railway drives jobs and growth, stimulates development and regeneration, and unlocks housing supply by creating better transport links. These links can bring communities previously cut off from public transport within easy reach of towns and cities, boosting access to services, jobs and education, and helping to address regional imbalance. Rail has also an important role to play in tackling the climate emergency, having a lower environmental impact than any other modes of transport by emitting less carbon and consuming less energy. Decarbonisation of the rail network will further enhance these benefits, and it is a key objective of the review. An improved, expanded, accessible rail network across the island will also deliver environmental benefits by encouraging modal shift, and in the process reducing congestion and emission and improving safety. Some of the key recommendations and interventions in respect of the North include decarbonisation of the rail network, including electrification of the Belfast-Dublin line, frequency, speed and capacity improvements on the Belfast-Dublin and Belfast-Derry lines, new lines from Belfast to Newry and Portadown to Derry. And just to clarify on Mr Durkin's comment in relation to the speed of the Portadown to Derry connection, it is planned for that rail network to have a 200 km/h speed on it, so it is a high-speed connection. New lines from Belfast, Newry and Portadown to Derry, and cross-border routes from Derry to Letterkenny and Portadown to Mullingar. Reinstating the railway line between Lisburn and Antrim, enabling Belfast International Airport to be connected to the rail network, and improving existing rail connections at George Best Belfast City Airport as well. And I'm also conscious that there has been concerns raised about the proposed lack of connection to the City of Derry Airport, which I think is something as the review moves on, because we are talking about an investment over 25-30-year period. And as has been said, there will be a number of ministers in position before this comes to this conclusion. There is huge opportunities now. We have opened up the debate about improving our railway services for connections, particularly to our ports and to our airports. A very quick intervention.
A couple of very quick, low-hanging fruit questions. Would the Minister work with his officials? Casement in 2028, Balmoral Station could be upgraded with better signage to get people to Casement, and Belfast City Airport, Sydenham Station's there, but very, very poor signage.
I note in the last hour and a half in the Chamber we've spent a few £1 billion, and in the debate before me there was a few £1 billion spent. So I would like to prioritise everything, but even in fairness to Assembly members and Assembly colleagues, you're going to have to start prioritising, because we can't. There's not billions to spend. So it is. Well, you're the opposition. through the chair, you drop me up a list of things you don't want me to spend money on, which will leave the things I can spend money on. So finalising the rail review puts us on the path to delivering these interventions is one of my key priorities as an infrastructure minister. While these recommendations, which will grow and enhance our rail network, are to be welcomed, I recognise that many are disappointed by the omissions of rail connections in Fermanagh, as several speakers have raised this point today. The provision of rail services to Fermanagh in particular and Enniskillen was considered as part of the review. However, the review reported that the proposed railway line did not appear to stimulate sufficient demand to support a rail service within the time frame for the review. Therefore, in the view of the report's authors, a rail service to Enniskillen would be unlikely to represent good value for money at this time. The review instead found that a higher frequency integrated bus link between Enniskillen and rail stations such as Omagh and Dungannon may provide a better public transport option. However, my officials are continuing to explore the viability of rail services to Fermanagh with the appointed review consultants and will report back to me in this matter in coming weeks. I am keen to extend the rail network to as many parts of the country as possible. While the review extends to 2050, the intention is to build in review points over that time period. Should this latest analysis continue to report that rail services to Fermanagh are not viable within the time frame of that review, these review periods will allow for consideration of that decision at a later stage. This review is an excellent example of joint collaborative working on cross-border priorities. I am committed to continuing that partnership with working with Southern colleagues to realise the extent of the ambitions of the review, and discussions between my officials have been continuing even when their Southern counterparts have been continuing even while the Assembly was down, and I will be engaging with Minister Ryan next week in relation to this and a number of other matters as well. If the review's recommendations are implemented in full in the coming decades, the capital cost is estimated to be over 30 billion in 2023 prices. For the North, the total cost estimate is 7.7 billion, which is approximately 0.31 billion per annum over a 25-year period. Yep.
I thank the Minister for giving way. He's just talked there about the costs, and I welcome what he has said in relation to officials engaging, particularly with regards to Fermanagh. That will also increase cost as well, so would he accept that engaging with the Department for Transport from a Westminster point of view is also needed in relation to this cost?
And I have no difficulty in engaging with the Department of Transport, and I'll come on to the connectivity review shortly within my remarks. There is a responsibility in the British Government to help fund this project and other transport projects in the North. We all pay taxes to the Treasury, so we have all invested in the tax regime, so we expect to have a better return on it, and as was noted by the Finance Minister earlier, it has now been accepted that we are underfunded. So I certainly will be engaging with the Department of Transport around this project and other projects which I believe the British Government should be investing in. This is a significant investment, one which can deliver multiple benefits for our people, our economy and our environment. Given the scale of the interventions and the magnitude of transformation involved, delivering these benefits will undoubtedly be challenging and will require support from the executive colleagues and the necessary resources being made available to my department. We will also look at all avenues of funding available given the importance of this work in terms of economic activity and connectivity. The review was released for public consultation from July to September last year. My officials are working closely with their Southern colleagues to address the issues raised through the consultation and finalise the review. However, the finalisation of the review is only the starting point. The review's recommendations provide policy makers and ministers in both jurisdictions with an evidence-based framework to inform future investment decisions. More detailed work will be needed to test the feasibility and affordability of the recommendations and guide future investment decisions. One of the key initial steps will be the prioritisation of the review recommendations and development of an implementation plan. My officials are already engaging with their Southern colleagues on these matters. With regards to ongoing developments in relation to rail, My department has in recent years invested over £100 million in major rail projects in the North West. That includes Phase 1 and 2 of the Coleraine to Derry track, relay project totalling over £70 million, as well as the North West multimodal transport hub amounting to over £27 million. However, I accept more can be done, and that is why my department approved the business case for Phase 3 of the Coleraine to Derry project, November 2022, and made available over £97 million to Transnet to take this project forward. Yep.
Appreciate those figures. Can the Minister commit to ruling out any changes to the concessionary fare scheme which would restrict, limit or stop free travel for people over 60?
Officials and I are currently discussing the consultation responses to that document. My intent is to retain the services as they are. I will have to engage, most likely with my executive colleagues, around how we secure the budget for that. But my intention is to secure the services as they are. A separate feasibility study examined the introduction of a half-hourly service between Derry and Belfast, which will consider the possibility of an additional rail halts on the Coleraine to Derry line, including at Derry City Airport, is also being progressed and will inform future investment in this area. We all are aware that transport is the second largest emitter of greenhouse gas. Decarbonisation of transport is vitally important if we are to meet the targets set out in the Climate Change Act. The rail network will play an increasingly important role as we seek to encourage people to move to more sustainable transport options, and at the same time we must seek to reduce the emissions from our rolling stock as part of that process. A first step is the procurement of a new enterprise fleet that will enable it to operate on battery and electric power. You will be aware, however, that given the many competing budget priorities that my department faces, funding our public transport services remains challenging. I can also assure you that we will continue to seek funding for our public transport network with my executive colleagues, especially given the clear role of public transport in helping to address the climate emergency, alongside support for many of the executive's other priorities, including health, education and the economy, as many members have pointed out in relation to public transport services, because the benefits of public transport services, particularly rail, doesn't end at the rail station. I think Mr Honeyford had pointed that out. And we obviously will be, as part of the proposals moving forward, ensuring that there's connectivity from our rail stations to the public services as well, because it is important also for our economy. And I think Mr Gilden had also pointed out in terms of the economic benefits of investment in rail services. Decisions made in this place 60 years ago need to be reversed. At that time, obviously, the growth of the private car was driving decision-making processes. Mr Carr refers to the austerity measures. It's not a new thing being introduced at that time as well, and the proposals to move away from public transport in a bid to save money. They were mistaken. Now, we've had 60 years of hindsight to correct that, but we have an opportunity now through this report to correct the mistakes of the past, to have huge opportunities for all our peoples across these islands and ensure that no one's left behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister. And I call on Keith Buchanan to wind on the amendment, and you have 5 minutes.
Speaker, I think I've written too many notes, so if I met anybody, I'll apologise in advance. So I'll cover obviously individually people's comments broadly. So Mark Durkin referred to the SDLP's commitment to All Ireland Rail, the decarbonisation of public transport, and referred to the North West being isolated, the North West of Ireland, Northern Ireland, whatever. Referred to the isolation of that area, and I appreciate that. And he also referred in his comments to the increase in numbers year on year to Londonderry, and obviously the people taking public transport increased year on year, and obviously the train travel being the environmentally friendly option. Deborah Erskine in her remarks then made several points. Is expertise there to deliver the project? Is it actually out there? And then referred to the report should be out in late spring. 30 recommendations within the report, and obviously mentioned connection to Belfast International Airport as one of the recommendations, and indeed other airports. and obviously made the point, and several other members, and I'll touch on individually, made the point about Fermanagh and the regional imbalance to the west or southwest of Northern Ireland, and why is it not on the part of the 32 county, the 26 and 6, which we all know is 32, why is it not there? Also referred to the Northern Ireland audit report and the issues with delivery and costs associated with infrastructure type of projects like this. Cathal Boylan then, frequent reliable travel, referred to travel by train, underinvestment and neglect over years, welcome funding recently by the Irish Government for the additional travel north-south, and then unlocking opportunities. Peter McReynolds referred to stimulating economic growth. There's a few differences of opinions in respect to journeys. Mickey referred to 70% of journeys by car, broadly. The climate change threat, and then the low emission transport network. John Stewart referred to lack of transport in the west of the province, again, the Fermanagh point. Mentioned hydrogen, powered trains, etc., and the airport access, like others had mentioned. Costing the project and reference to timeline, 25 years to complete, over 5 mandates, several different ministers, and mentioned some issues with rail lines in his own area in the future going to be underwater, which is obviously a big issue. Pádraig de Logre referred to the Union Connectivity Report and the East strengthened and the West being neglected in that, and referred to the committed minister that we have in front of us going forward. Stephen Dunn referred to the airport connections, the fiscal challenge that exists more broadly, and demand that exists for rail travel, and referred to Bangor to Belfast, the increase in numbers there. Patrick Brown then referred to £1 spent comes in at £2.50 income, and which is generated. Electrification of new and existing lines. Mentioned the Fermanagh issue, as we refer to. No statutory protection for unused railways or rail tracks, and also mentioned about the heritage railways and their importance. Anya Murphy then referred to tourism and the potential that it has in Fermanagh, traffic and then the Skilling Town Centre, and obviously the reduction that would have if this was implemented. Also referred to Fermanagh, obviously, and the climate emergency. Gary Middleton then referred to the suffering of historical underinvestment, available executive allocations for this, referred to positive changes in the city he represents in this past 10 years more broadly. Colm Gillian referred to South Tyrone and Fermanagh and the lack of future connections there and in the future. David Honeyford referred to renewing and reshaping the economy by good infrastructure, build on current tourism, public transport as a driver of change. He also talked about glider route and connection of these from train to industry, so in other words, train station to industry. I think that was the point. And I don't think there's a glider mention of Fermanagh, not at this stage, for Tom here. Alan Robinson referred to those travelling on the public transport by Smart Pass. 82% workers travel by car to work. The new railway halt in the northwest near the airport he was referring to or wanted. Build it and they will come. Matthew O'Toole then referred to move people and goods, which I think was a good point, referred to just more than people. It's obviously goods as well across these islands. Referred to a £31 billion investment, and it was inspirational. Justin McNulty was a once-in-a-generation opportunity, connection to Armagh City, individually responsible for the environment, grasp the opportunity to
could the member draw his remarks to a close, please? And
then I'll finish this with the Minister. Sorry, Jerry. Keen to support the rail network, stimulates development and jobs, and the debate is now open. I think the Minister referred to the conversation now can start at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I call on Daniel McCrossan to wind the debate, and you have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think today's debate shows one thing, that this is an issue that we all feel so strongly about, and I in particular, being from Tyrone, know more than most the real deficit in terms of infrastructure that exists. This map that my colleague Mark Durkin held up earlier tells a story in itself. No words are needed. There's a clear problem with this picture, and generations of people have suffered as a result of a lack of investment in the West. This is an issue that has plagued the West and across Ireland in terms of our connectivity for many, many years. Decades ago, rail services were stripped away from Tyrone, Fermanagh, Donegal, right into Derry, as touched on by members across this chamber today, effectively cutting off the West out of the rail transportation picture. This short-sighted decision
as pointed out rightly by the Minister, has exacerbated the already blatant disregard for the West, leaving us feeling, and I can say this strongly because it's feedback I receive a lot from people, like second-class citizens in terms of infrastructure and rail connectivity. It is time to acknowledge the past neglect and advocate for change. And I think that there's a united voice in recognition of that. But there are members in this House today that have had the luxury of enjoying rail connectivity for all of their lives. All we have is the treacherous, dangerous A5 road. The SDLP has taken a proactive stance by spearheading the consultation on the All-Ireland Rail Review led by Nicola Mallon. This comprehensive review aims to rectify the decades of neglect that the North West, the West, has endured in terms of infrastructure. Rail is not just about transportation, it is about safety, the environment, the economy, and most importantly, connecting communities across this island. A well-developed rail network fosters economic growth, reduces carbon emissions, and enhances social cohesion by bridging the physical gaps between our regions. And this has been pointed out by numerous members today. Imagine the potential transformation that awaits us, and selfishly speaking, Mr. Speaker, when Strabane and Omagh are seamlessly connected to Donegal, Derry, Fermanagh and the rest of this island through a reliable rail system. The connectivity will not only enhance the quality of life of our people, but also unlock new opportunities for economic development and cultural change. Let us not overlook the practicality and value of investing in rail infrastructure. It makes sense on so many levels. By prioritising rail connectivity in the West and across this island, we are making a commitment to a sustainable and prosperous future for all of our citizens. I will indeed.
Rather than this being a kind of writing a cheque for billions or asking for a cheque for billions, as was said previously by the Minister, actually all we're asking for is a costed plan. We realise this is going to take more than years, it will take decades. But you'd also agree with me that there's now an increased borrowing power the Executive has under RRI, and they could look to invest some of that in expanding rail.
Absolutely. I agree with my colleague that the first step to ensuring change in relation to rail is making your first move, and I would hope that the Minister will do that in ensuring that we take a step forward collectively, together, towards achieving and rectifying this deficit. For over a century, trains rattled across the land, linking towns to cities, but that came to a halt in 1965, a decision that ended a century of rail access for Tyrone and Donegal and stripped the West of most of its infrastructure. The decline began just after partition, which was touched on earlier in this House. And partition disrupted trade on many natural routes. The closure also severed a vital link between the North West and the west of the island and Dublin. Since these closures, 2 whole generations have been raised in Tyrone and Donegal without access to a transport mode that much of the rest of this island takes for granted. I will indeed.
Flynn, appreciate member giving way. Would he also accept that the troubles in Northern Ireland caused a huge problem for the rail network, particularly the Belfast to Dublin line, where it was plagued with bomb scares and indeed bombs on the railway line?
The biggest act of self-harm in our infrastructure of all aspects was the Troubles. There was much disruption caused to our infrastructure and much destroyed that we've never actually properly been able to replace. So I thank the member for the intervention. The public's desire to see rail return and expand across the West has remained strong ever since it was removed. This is shown when the public consultation held as part of the cross-border All-Ireland Rail Review strategy received its highest number of contributions from the Fermanagh, Omagh and Derry and Strabane districts, confirming the huge interest that exists across the west of Northern Ireland for the return and expansion of our rail network. My favourite paragraph, I must admit, Mr. Speaker, in the whole report was the restoration of a line from Derry to Portadown and on to Letterkenny in County Donegal would link the large towns of Strabane and Omagh and Dungannon to the rail network and greatly improved intercity connectivity from the north west to Belfast and Dublin. That is a line, a paragraph that gives great hope to the people in my area that have been deprived from decent infrastructural links for a generation. People in West Tyrone and many areas across the north have been let down by substandard rail and public transport links for far too long. I, like many others, are reminded constantly of our railway heritage through abandoned tracks and station houses across our constituencies, many of which have become greenways. Just recently, in this week, there's one opened in Strabane. I have to say it's a fantastic investment local area. But now we're talking about this, we're seeing a need to ensure that we protect those routes. A cruel reminder of the railways available to past generations for hundreds of years. When it was launched by Minister Nicola Mallon and Minister Eamon Ryan, I said that the All-Ireland Rail Review was once in a generation opportunity to address the lack of rail infrastructure in my constituency and in many others. And that is the theme, Mr. Speaker, that has come across this House today. There's a great sense of hope and excitement about this conversation. The review provided us with a unique opportunity to completely reimagine our rail network, creating a fit-for-purpose cross-border service, hugely expanding the number of routes available and getting people where they need to be in a timely, efficient and safe manner. And I put safe in there, Mr. Speaker, because again, I'll say, as a member for West Tyrone, we take for granted every day that there's many people that go out the door to go to work, to carry out their duties, to take their children to school, unfortunately, have not come home because of the treacherous infrastructural issues that are in my constituency and in others. I argued in the submission to the review that West Tyrone must form an important part of these plans as a dedicated hub that serves the north and south. If we're going to address historic issues around lack of jobs, investment, improves people's standard of living, then we need modern transport links that meet the needs of our population. Connecting three, this is pointed out by Mr. Stewart, connecting three, in terms of some airports, connecting three of the island's main airports, Dublin, Belfast, the Belfast International and Shannon, to the rail network would give 90% of commercial aviation passengers access by train. And I welcome the comments by Minister O'Dowd in relation to Derry, because it would truly add to the sustainability of Derry City Airport if we had actual access directly into that airport. It would be transformational for the economy in that part of the island. 2/3 of the island's freight tonnage would pass through ports served by the railway network. If all of its recommendations were delivered, the review authors suggest 700,000 more people across the island of Ireland would live within 5 kilometres of its train station, boosting rail catchment by 25% on today's totals. We'll never be able to improve our economy unless we offer adequate transport to all major towns and cities on this island, including places like Enniskillen and Fermanagh, which has been left out of the review. We need the Infrastructure Minister to bring back a costed implementation plan this year, and we need to deliver real options for my constituency, for Fermanagh and every county on this island. Together, let us advocate for a comprehensive and inclusive rail network that serves the needs of every single community, including those in the West. The time for change is now. We must work together towards a brighter and better connected future for all our children. This debate is much more than about rail in itself. It is, as rightly pointed out, about addressing a historical deficit, a wrong from many years ago, and we have an opportunity in this House today to step forward together to offer all of our people a much better future.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you indeed for all the speakers on the debate today. The question is that the amendment standing in the names of Deborah Erskine, Keith Buchanan and Steve Dunn be made. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. No. We're going to have to do it. Yeah, okay. Clear the law. Order. Order. Members will resume their seats. Come on, come on, come on. The question is that the amendment standing in the names of Deborah Erskine, Keith Buchanan and Stephen Dunn be made. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary? No. Do we have tellers? Order. Order. Tellers have been appointed as follows. Tellers for the ayes are Harry Harvey and Gary Middleton. Tellers for the noes are Mark Durkin and Sinead McLaughlin. Clear the lobby. The Assembly will divide. Ayes to my right, noes to my left. Secure the doors. Order. Members, can you resume your seats? Mark. There we go. Thank you. Clerk, could you please read the result?
69 members voted, 25 members voted aye, 44 members voted no. The amendment therefore falls.
The amendment falls, therefore unfasten the doors. The question is that the motion standing in the order paper be agreed. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary noes. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Thank you.